the BEST grant is an acronym for Building Excellent Schools Today. And what you do as a school district is you have a master facilities plan that is drawn up by experts, and you prioritize in your district the buildings that need it, and the middle school needed it the most. So we were actually in June of 2019 awarded the Building Excellent Schools Today grant. It's a $15 million project. We had to go before a board in Denver and defend our case, our grant, and of course we were awarded. Now the next step is we can only receive those funds if we come up with our local match, which is $4.5 million. We applied for a waiver and was granted the waiver at 29% local match, and so we have to come up with that. So we have to go to the voters for that.
The district has already begun that process. We've put a question 4B on the ballot. We're asking the local voters to approve 4B, which will allow the school district to raise the annual fee that's required for us to be able to borrow the money. And when I say borrow, I mean that we're going to go out for a general obligation bond. Now, a general obligation bond can only be used for capital improvement. No other expenses can come from that. So this money will be used only for renovation at the middle school and to try to begin as much as we can of the deferred maintenance at Trinidad High School. So the money that we raise from this will be used to pay off the bond, is basically what it is. So we're asking the voters to please approve item 4B on the ballot, and we can do this without raising their taxes. And the reason we can do that is because our current bond, which built Fisher's Peak and renovated Eckhart, will be done in 2020. As a result, we can go to the voters and say, hey, please let us have that money so that we can continue on to do the renovations that need to take place within our school district. In some cases, we've heard questions like, well, why didn't you do that over the last 20 years? Why didn't you fix that school up? Well, the short answer to a long question is that over the last dozen years or so, there's been something in the state budget called the negative factor, most recently the budget stabilization factor. Our legislature in the state of Colorado has to have a balanced budget every year. So as a result, what they do is they figure out what each school gets throughout the state. And they say, okay, Trinidad, you're going to get X number of dollars in state funding plus your local taxes, so for a total amount of so many dollars per pupil. But by the way, we also have to balance the state budget. So we're going to go back to Trinidad and all the other 178 school districts in the state of Colorado and say we're going to take some of that back, the negative factor. Well, over the last number of years here that's been in place in the state, we've lost over $12 million in funding in our small school district here, over $12 million. So this is just a tremendous opportunity for us in this district to gain back a large chunk of that with this grant of $11.5 million and allow us then to go forward with all the necessary health safety issues that we have to take care of, plus the technology at the middle school, and allow us to start working on some of the deferred maintenance that we've put aside at Trinidad High School, those being the two oldest buildings in the district.
May I add? Mm-hmm. Many people believe, especially since the legalization of marijuana was granted, part of the propaganda was that the marijuana money was going to help education, it was going to go to the kids, it was all about the students, but the school districts do not receive any revenue from the marijuana money. So the only way that we can tap into that money is through the BEST grant, because a portion of the state marijuana revenue is in that allotment of money for school districts. So we were one of the few school districts that were able to tap into the marijuana revenues for capital projects.
Yeah, and the other thing with that, Bonnie, is it's critical for us to be able to do this year, because the year before, we had not yet been awarded the grant. We went to the voters and said, hey, can we have some money to do this? But we didn't know we had the grant. Well, election day, we found out we did have the grant because some other schools didn't pass their bond. We could have had this done last year. In essence, the Lord takes care of us, so I think, because what happened was we're able to get the money for a lesser amount this time because they lowered our match. So we're able to get actually more dollars, even though the renovation is substantially the same as it was the last time. The construction cost went up like $1 million plus. So with those costs, every year that's going to go up. And if we were to do this again next year, the cost would increase again next year. And then the other thing is, you never know if Best is going to have that money in that pool. That pool started at $40 million for many years, and as Bonnie said, then they put the tax revenue from the marijuana money into that pool and raised it to $80 million a year. So they were able to fund a lot more projects with that, and that's how we were able to come into it. So it's all very critical that we do it now, we do it this year, and it's for the kids. Let's get this done for the kids as soon as we can. It's really important. Mill levy. Our current mill levy to pay off the bond that's in place is 4.569 mils. That's mills, of course, per million in terms of, or per thousand in terms of your tax dollars that are assessed. And of course, as we talk about mills, a mill in Trinidad, in our particular area in Los Animas County, is based on our total assessed valuation within the county. So a mill in Trinidad will generate X number of dollars. A mill in the Cherry Creek area will generate a whole lot more because the assessed valuation in that particular area is a lot higher. So our mill levy that we assess to get this, we're looking for a dollar amount every year, basically. So depending on whatever the assessed valuation is for the county, the mills can move up and down slightly to match that. The idea being that we just need to have an X number of dollars to be able to pay off our general obligation bond every year, period. That's as simple as, from a layman, that I can make it with mills. The simple answer to that question, anytime there's a rise in property tax, of course, you're going to pay more if that happens. Our idea here is that we want to keep the mills exactly the same, so the property tax will not increase with regard to that. Okay, so as long as all things remain static in terms of mill levy, in terms of our assessed valuation in the county, everything should remain constant with that. Now again, there's always slight variations, and if you talk to Jody at the assessor's office, she can tell you how that kind of runs up and down as periodically, and I'm not sure if it's every 2 years, 3 years, they have to go in and reassess all the property within the county. That changes the base and said the county property is worth X number of dollars. Then they say, for me as a residential homeowner, my percentage of that is 7.2%. So it's 7.2% is what I'm taxed at based on the assessed valuation of my property. So you see, that goes way down for me with regard to that. So that's where we come up with a number of mills, and what we're looking for is just a dollar amount. And so again, our dollar amount should stay constant every year. Mills kind of move up and down depending on assessed valuation. Layman's terms.
After the local match of 29%, which is 4.5 million, the Best Grant will take care of 11 million of that. So we have the 4.5 that we have to come up with and keep, like Mr. Montero said, if we keep our annual amount that we need to pay the bond, we'll have 2.9 in additional funds, and we're going to use that for the deferred maintenance capital outlay projects at the Trinidad High School.
There's a lot of ADA compliance issues that we have to come up to date with, and then there's other things within the school. I mean, the school was built in 1972, and you look at how many years that those windows have been in place, those units on the roof have been in place, and so on. just like anything else, we all wear out, and I'm a prime example of that. So what happens is that you have to replace some of those things. You have to repair some of those things. And through these years, due to that negative factor I spoke about, we just did not have the money to be able to do that. So now with this money, when we go out and ask for a general obligation bond, which is where we're asking the taxpayers to just keep the tax rate the same, don't change anything, we're going to raise $568,915 per year to pay off our general obligation bond. Well, what happens is once the voters are so gracious and pass this for us, the bonding company is going to go out and get all of this money. That money is going to go up to the state to pay off our $4.5 million. We're going to have $2.9 million left to start working on the high school, and then we start paying that bond off at the rate of $568, et cetera, $1,000 per year. So we get all the money right away so we can start the work right away. And we really did hit the ground running on this, by the way. Engineering was there today, I believe, with the meeting, setting up, laying out. We've got the firm here in place, ready to go. And the reason that we had to do that was, remember I talked about construction costs going up? If we don't hit the ground running and we don't lock in some of those contractors, the price is just going to keep going up. So you get everything in place, so when our voters say yes in November, whatever the date is, that it's finally verified, the 10th or 12th, after everything's verified in the election, those people are going to hit the ground, start going out, getting bids, and we're going to encourage local contractors to bid on this because we want our people to share in this project as much as they possibly can, either as the general contractor for a part of the project or as a subcontractor for part of the project. So it's important for us to get this done and hit the ground running. So our board went ahead and got this firm in place right now. So we're ready to go to work as soon as the voters say yes.
Who would not take the opportunity to take advantage of a 29% loan or grant that would end up in a $15 million project for students, for staff? There's a couple of reasons that this project was at the top of the severity of needs for the district, and that is because it's hard to retain and recruit students and staff in a building that is not comfortable, that doesn't have the quality of technology that it needs, and the internet infrastructure that it needs. These students need to have modern, smart classrooms, just like they do in Cherry Creek. Hate to use them as an example, but some of those more influential schools have had those for years, and our students don't even have a science lab. And what this will give is 30 smart classrooms and STEM labs, giving students what they should have had a long time ago. And that's what we want to focus on, is the student achievement, the academic achievement, and the instructional environment for the students and for the teachers, for the instructors. That's the main reason, is for the education of the students and for them to be able to be comfortable and not having to have fans blowing all over the place and windows propped open because the windows won't stay open or shut. There's a lot of health and safety issues. We'll have a vestibule at the middle school with secure entryway that will, in these days and times, you need to make sure that the students are protected, and that's one of the ways that we can get that accomplished.
Well, yeah, it's all about the children. I mean, it's not about us as a board. It's not about our superintendent. It's really about the children. And I think what kind of brought it home for me was I was explaining what the BEST grant was about to my neighbor. And my neighbor's got a child that's at Fisher's Peak. And her eyes just lit up and she said, wow. She said, you mean when my daughter, I'll leave her name out, gets to go up there to that middle school, she's going to have this and this and this and this? And I said, yes, she's going to have that. And she was just thrilled that her daughter was going to be able to, when she got to that level, partake of this. So it's for all the kids, not only the kids that we have at the middle school right now, but it's for all those kids that are going to follow them, the thousands that we're going to have come through our district and be in that school.
And may I add also that the auditorium is a main event center for the community as well, and that will receive air conditioning and a little bit of a facelift. so that we can enjoy those activities more comfortably and maybe rent it out a little bit more as well to the public. But I think that this renovation and these projects, they're not only just long overdue, but I think it will help inspire the community to do what's already being done around town, which is renovating some of these old buildings. This middle school has good bones, and you just can't build buildings like that anymore, and you need to keep them around. This 170-year-old building will last another 100 years, and for many more generations of students going through our system. The 4.569 mills are dedicated just for bond for capital improvement or capital projects. That will obviously go away, so your property taxes will decrease. But what will increase is the cost to decommission or to raise down the middle school. And we have to put something there to make it safe for the community. So we will be at a big loss if we have to decommission or tear down that Trinidad Middle School.
Well, and again, going back to the $11 million we're getting from the state, it's
yeah.
just like, hey, we got $11 million, and they said, here it is. Trinidad, take this, and we're going to say, gee, we can't take your money. Take $11 million back and give it to some other school so that they can get their projects going. And that's what's going to happen with that money. And then what are we going to do with the building? Remember, I talked about the negative factor. We're having trouble maintaining facilities because we just don't have the budget for that. So what's going to happen to this school? Well, it's not going to get any younger, and it's not going to get any better all by itself. So what's going to happen? Well, eventually, I think the writing's on the wall, just like an old house. If you don't take care of it, what's going to happen to that house? Eventually, it's got to go away. And wouldn't that be a terrible loss for this community to lose that landmark? My goodness, we just can't do that. And again, it goes back to the kids. We have to do this for these kids.
I think most of the excitement is around the adults wishing this for the students. But we've had students give testimonials about what it's like to have science without a science lab, or to have August when teachers might be a little grouchy and the students might be a little grouchy and sweaty. Those are just some of the comfort issues and the technology issues. But not being able to, just let me give you an example, the Colorado, I don't know what's called, CMAS, the state assessments, we're supposed to be taking those online, but we don't have the technology infrastructure to have students take that assessment simultaneously online. So we're still doing the old primitive paper pencil test that we should be doing online. And this project will provide the technology infrastructure to be able to take those assessments online. I think we're going on 3 generations of families who have gone through the district, through the middle school, whether it was a high school or whether it was the middle school. And back in the day when you're going through one of those that building, you went home and you didn't have air conditioning in your home. If you drove home, you didn't have air conditioning in your car. If you went to the store, there wasn't air conditioning there. Now, with air conditioning, the middle school is the only place that doesn't have air conditioning. Everything else does. So that's why it matters so much, because people aren't adjusted to it because there's air conditioning everywhere else. So that makes a big difference to the kids as well as the adults. But like I was saying before, the adults are so excited about it. A lot of times you think that an adult's going to say, well, I survived it without air conditioning, and I think my 3rd generation should also. But I think they're more the opposite. They're more excited about having the students have what they didn't have, and for them to have a really good learning environment. And there's so many adults that are pushing this. And you asked about the students, how they feel about it. You'll see students out at the roundabout or out at Bob and Earl's, and they're campaigning because they want to see this go through. These are high schoolers who have already been through the middle school programs and seeing the science labs, and they want their younger siblings to have a better education as well. And so they're out there campaigning along with the adults. So I'm really excited about that.